Shiva, for example, is financed by a private donation, the Deichmann Foundation in Germany, and they pay the funding, they pay the costs for the teaching stuff there and the things we need in the library and so on. It's very hard to say that a field, or in which way a field changed during the centuries, or because I'm now in the field since about 20 years, and biblical studies, you can say, started about 2,000 years ago, and so it's a very long time for the whole field and a very short period of my own involvement. But nevertheless, I have the feeling that in the last 20 or 30 years or so the time when I studied and since I'm professionally working in the field, there are a lot of changes. And the most important change I see, that it opened up and become a real universal kind of scholarship. When I studied, our big professors were all, one can say, white, middle class members of accepted or established Christian churches, and they are mainly from Western Europe and the United States, and that's it. And now we have biblical scholars from really all around the world. We have at least as many female scholars as we have male scholars, and we have, besides the still committed Christian scholars, we have now a very strong number of, let's say, secular scholars who have not a kind of religious devotion to the field, but more just a historical or social interest, or even political interest in Christianity. And this, of course, has changed our field dramatically, and I would say in a very beneficial way, because we have it's more colorful, more diverse, different approaches. The only slight disadvantage is that it's very hard to oversee the whole field, because in my time it was enough to follow, in a way, the major journals, and it was clear what you have to do to follow the track and the development in the field. Now you have new journals more or less every year, and therefore there's a tendency of specialization within the biblical studies, and even a tendency to over-specialization, which means that we look up just only very small parts in the New Testament. So some scholars devote their whole life to the study of, let's say, the Gospel of Matthew or the study of Paul, without realizing that Paul or Matthew or whatever is just one part within the whole game. And so the danger is sometimes that you describe your own little piece in very precise terms, but in a way that you create the impression, oh, this is all what you need to know. So if you have Paul, and if you have the let's say, the perspective on Jesus by Paul, then this is all what you need to know. Or if you have the Jesus as described by Matthew. And the real task is that you are able to nevertheless integrate the questions and the insights from the whole field into a coherent picture of the development of a tradition or the development of history. And so specialization is a good thing, but you need a general approach and a general idea of the subject to avoid the negative side effects of over-specialization. So what I want to say, we need a kind of general idea and a kind of general knowledge or generalization at the same time. My first book, which I mentioned already, has a German title, Jüdische Steingefäße und pharisäische Frömmigkeit, which means, translated, Jewish stone vessels and Pharisaic piety. And in this work I combined all my interests. So I started with an archaeological item, these stone vessels, which can be dated very precisely. And I tried to used the stone vessels to show how a specific form of religion was practiced in this time when these stone vessels were available. I found this very challenging and interesting, because when we dealing with texts, we normally only see what the author of this specific text wants people to do, or how he sees reality, but it's very hard to check what was really behind. So archaeological artifacts can help us to show and to demonstrate, okay, people really followed this kind of guidance or principles. In this kind, I think we have a clear set of Pharisaic principles which were introduced roughly in the time of Jesus by the Pharisees to the Jewish people, to help them to live a life according to the biblical laws of purity. And the stone vessels are the major means of it. And now the question was always, okay, have the Pharisees really influence? Are they able to influence the people, or is this just a kind of religious idea or ideal without any practical consequences? And the stone vessels found in excavations in many Jewish households demonstrate that obviously a lot of people really lived according to these religious laws. And this helps us, together with other findings from this period, to understand the Jewish piety not just on the basis of texts, but on the basis of actual and practical deeds and doings of the people. My second book then was my PhD on the Pharisees, and here I developed the topic of the Pharisees from the perspective of the history of research. So I started in the middle of the 19th century, when modern research on the Pharisees started within Jewish scholarship as well as within Christian scholarship. And I developed this idea to see how Jewish scholarship developed and created a kind of picture of the Pharisees, and at the same time the Christian scholars developed a picture of the Pharisees, and to see how this were in a way incompatible picture of the Pharisees, although both are using the same set of texts to make their interpretations. And this helps me to understand that it's always our pre-understanding and our personal viewpoint, our personal commitment to a specific faith tradition, which influences our way in which we approach religious texts and religious traditions. And I think it's unavoidable to do this. It's not possible to say, okay, in the moment I'm a scholar, I'm no longer a Jew, or I'm no longer a Christian, but it's necessary to think about it and to reflect your own perspective, your own vantage point, and to be aware that because of my, let's say, Christian standing, I have a specific viewpoint, and I have to allow my students or my readers to realize that I'm approaching a topic from this specific viewpoint. So I'm not telling the truth, but I'm telling what is true about the Pharisees from the perspective of a Christian scholar who sees the Pharisees in a specific light, framed by the New Testament texts, and then the other texts were placed around it. So my last book project, which I make together with two colleagues at the University of Jena, was dealing with Walter Grundmann. And Walter Grundmann was a New Testament scholar in the time of the Third Reich in Germany, and he was one of these scholars who want to get rid of all the Jewish stuff within Christianity. So Grundmann is an example how a scholar used his knowledge, his influence, his insights to make a point within the society, or to be accepted by the then Nazi politicians and the Nazi society in Germany. And so he misused his Christian conviction to be accepted by the then ruling powers and forces. So it's the question, how do we allow ideologies to frame our thinking, and how let we allow influences from the political field or from the kind of social pressure to influence our study and our results. And again, to deal with somebody in the past whose final outcome, so to speak, is visible, is easier than to reflect your own situation. So it's a kind of case study about the vulnerability, about the dangers of humanities within a totalitarian society.